something kind of weird happened to me a couple of weeks ago. I woke up in the middle of the night doing maths, of all things. Now, that's not what was so weird. I mean, it was weird, don't get me wrong, but it's not the weird thing. The weird thing was the calculation itself. And I will tell you what that calculation was in a moment. And if you're kind of into esoteric topics, you might be a little bit freaked out by it as well. But before I tell you about what the calculation was, I want to tell you about what I normally think about when I daydream, right? Don't normally think about mathematics. What I normally think about is things like mythology and how does this myth correspond to human experience and what can we learn from it and these kinds of things, right? And I had gone to bed that night thinking about the Leviathan. Now, the Leviathan is a gigantic sea monster, which is best known for its appearance in the book of Job, where God has just essentially tortured Job, taken his children, and then appears to Job and says to him, "You don't know why I've done this, because my ways are ineffable. Can you do this? No, you can't. Can you do this? No, you can't. So can you fight the Leviathan and hook him with a harpoon and things like this, right?" And the kind of words that he uses when he's talking about the Leviathan is very much the language that you would use when talking about a fish, like a gigantic fish. And so in a lot of Jewish iconography, you'll find the Leviathan as a gigantic whale with big sharp teeth, that kind of thing. However, Leviathan is also described as a serpent in various other places in the Bible itself, but also in the various Jewish apocrypha and pseudo-epigraphical writings that exist, such as 4 Ezra, 2 Baruch, the Ladder of Jacob, the Book of Similitudes, and the Apocalypse of Abraham. But even without having to go as far as those non-canonical texts, we can find in Isaiah 27, for example, "In that day, the Lord will punish with his sword, his fierce, great and powerful sword, Leviathan the gliding serpent, Leviathan the coiling serpent. He will slay the monster of the sea." So it's quite clear that the Leviathan is associated with the sea, but is not necessarily a fish and is referred to as a serpent. And actually, here's something quite cool that I discovered recently in this book, Supernal, Serpent by Andrei Orlov, is that the gematria for the Hebrew word for serpent, which is nechesh, is 358. And 358 also happens to be the gematria number for Messiah or Messiah. So yes, if we come back a couple of videos to see how I was saying that Jesus calls himself the morning star in the book of Revelation, in the same way as star, son of the morning, Hallel ben Shachar, were the Hebrew words that got translated into Latin as Lucifer, giving us a kind of weird equivalence between the incarnate God and this idea of Lucifer, whatever that may be. But also we have in Psalms 74 verse 14, "It was you who crushed the heads of Leviathan and gave it as food to the creatures of the desert." Not the head of Leviathan, mind you. The word is plural, heads of Leviathan, giving us an idea that either there are several Leviathans or there are more than one head to the Leviathan. Now, according to the rabbinical form of the Haggadah, each of the monsters was multiplied into a pair, a male and a female, and according to Ezra 4, the female Leviathan was given to the righteous, which kind of corresponds to what we're reading here in Psalms. "You crushed the heads of Leviathan and gave it as food to the creatures of the desert." So even though we have two Leviathans, a male and a female, it is nevertheless the female Leviathan who is killed and given as food. So the many heads would correspond to that female Leviathan. So does the Leviathan have many heads? Well, I don't think that any of this is canon, but I'm going to get to my thoughts about the whole thing shortly, I promise. Just like the weird freaky calculation that I promised that I'm going to tell you about as well. Now, there just so happens to be a dragon with many heads that is supposed to be significant at the end of times, that is mentioned in the book of Apocalypse, and it's the beast. And I won't get into the polemic of whether Aleister Crowley was in fact the Beast 666 or not. He certainly called himself that, and it was great marketing, of course. But my concern is rather for the intentions of whoever wrote the Book of Revelations, the Apocalypse. And something tells me that whoever wrote the Apocalypse didn't necessarily specifically mean Aleister Crowley. But that weird calculation that I'm about to tell you about, that I woke up in the middle of the night with, kind of gave me a clue, at least gave me something to think about. So if the female Leviathan is slain and reserved as food for the righteous in the last days, what about the male Leviathan? Well, in the Ladder of Jacob, again a Jewish pseudo-epigraphical text, Abraham is taken up in the spirit to stand in front of the throne of God, and he's told to look beneath his feet at the world and its layout. And he sees there that the Leviathan stands as an axis mundi. In other words, he is a place where heaven, earth, and hell all join together. Now, that's very interesting for me. If you've been watching my show for a long time, you'll know that my attitude towards humanity is that we are that axis mundi, that conjunction point between heaven, earth, and hell, having access to all three realms. And I've always said that it's our duty to be masters of all three so that we can be custodians of all three. And ignoring one or the other or the third is tantamount to neglecting our responsibilities. So that evening I went to bed thinking to myself, is it possible that the Leviathan may represent humankind? So all right, let me tell you about the freaky calculation that I woke up with a couple of hours later. You know, that weird kind of time when you're not quite asleep, but you're not quite awake yet, and you're kind of in between. So that was a state in which I was, so I couldn't tell you exactly where the calculation started. All I know is that by the time the calculation was done, I had realized that 6 plus 6 was 12, and 12 times 6 is 72. Now, that didn't freak me out completely quite yet. I thought to myself, that's an interesting coincidence. 6 plus 6 times 6 is 72. Now, 72 is, yes, sure, the number of demons that were included in the catalogue of demons of the Ars Goetia in the Lesser Key of Solomon, sure. But much more importantly, in my opinion, it's the number of angels of the Shem Ha-Mephorash. And the angels of the Shem Ha-Mephorash are angels that have been created out of a 72-fold name of God. To be quite precise, the number 72 was considered to be of great importance, and searching through the Torah, they were looking for any passage that may have 72 characters. They found a passage that did have 72 characters, in fact, 3 sentences, one after the other, with 72 characters, 72 characters, and 72 characters. This is a passage in the book of Exodus where Moses is parting the Red Sea, a very famous passage. And so what these early Kabbalists did is that they used a method that was common to them, which was to use one line written from right to left, being Hebrew, one line written from left to right, quite uncommon, and then the third line being written from right to left. And then they created, in this way, 72 columns of 3 letters. Each of these columns of 3 letters then got the word El added at the end, or Iyah, in other words, of God. So the 1, 2, 3 letters of God, 1, 2, 3 letters of God. And then when meditating or invoking these particular individual parts of the name of God, they would then recognize what kind of effects that name had on their lives and on their experience. And books like The Gallery of Magic's 72 Angels of Magic, or of course Frederick Hockley's books of the 72 Angels of the Shem Ha-Mephorash, or the 6th and 7th books of Moses, where the 72 Angels of the Shem Ha-Mephorash are listed, that's where those angels come from. All right. Sorry for taking you down the little side paths. I think that the view's kind of more interesting when you see the bigger picture. So there I was in bed going, oh, that's kind of an interesting coincidence, right? 6 plus 6 times 6 is 72, the number associated with the name of God. It's funny how these coincidences happen, isn't it? And then I thought to myself, yeah, there's another number that is associated with the name of God, and it's the number 42. But that's got nothing to do with 666. And then I realized 42 is 6 times 6, which is 36, plus 6 is 42. Now at that point, I woke up. Because as much as one coincidence can happen, 2 coincidences like this seems like there's more going on here. Now, I haven't fully resolved this mystery, but there are two more clues that I've found. First of all, in this pseudo-epigraphical text, The Apocalypse of Abraham, the angel that brings Abraham to the seat of God, in order to look down upon the Leviathan to see it as the axis mundi, well, that angel is Yahoel. It's not an angel that I'd ever heard of before, but one of Yahoel's roles is to control the divine monsters, and another of Yahoel's roles is to personify the divine name. And then the second point that could be useful to know about is the fact that the angels of omnipotence that have been the object of the Gallery of Magic's latest book, Secret Angel Magic, well, those angels appear in the 6th and 7th books of Moses, and they appear in the context of calling Leviathan. I'm quoting here from page 99, citation of Quernithe or Leviathan. These, as well as the following exorcisms, contain only the peculiar names of the angels who will permit the conjured spirits to appear or will compel them by force to appear. Here the 3 angels of omnipotence will be called up to drive forth the monsters of hell, namely Elubatel, Ebuhuel, Atuesuel. Each name must be repeated 3 times. Now, I'm not 100% sure what to make of all of this, but what my gut instinct tells me is that we have a classic case of as above, so below. A classic case of Shiva being the singularity and Shakti being the multiplicity, and one in fact being the other. Once again, here we have the idea of God as a unity versus the many-fold name of God, this 72-fold divided name, where divinity can be observed one piece at a time. That's very reminiscent of the material realm, where God can be examined one piece at a time, each of us individually representing a shard of the whole. Or maybe this is just a sign that I should eat less rich food before going to bed. One way or another, I'd love to know what you think about all of this. Do leave a comment down below and let me know if you think this is significant in any way and how you would interpret it. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to click on that thumbs up button, and if you'd like to see more of these videos, subscribe and click on the bell button so that you don't miss any of my uploads. If you'd like to support the channel and ensure that this channel continues going forward, then there are YouTube memberships available and also a Patreon, where memberships start at just $2 a month, and members get access to the Foolish Fish Discord, where they can discuss amongst themselves, following some rather strict rules, but those rules allow us to dig quite deep under 300 different headings on the topic of magic. Thank you to all existing members, whether through YouTube or through Patreon, and very special thanks to the Level Infinity members, David Venturini, Caitlin Kopok, Aritz Murweta Ramos, Danny Barr, Eamon, Howard Wolf, Linda Hendricks, Stephen Hunter, and Susanna Red Elfs. Thank you so much for your very generous support. And also a very big thank you to all the Level 3 members whose names you can see scrolling up on the left-hand side over here. If you'd like to have a video one-to-one conversation with me, then I do consultations, and you can find the links for that down below. We can talk about this topic or any topic that is important to you, and I can give you my opinion and recommendations, or I can read your tarot, or we can get out the I Ching oracle and do an I Ching reading if you prefer that. And finally, thank you to every viewer who has watched until the very end. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Of yourselves and of each other. See you very soon with another video. Bye-bye.